Once upon a time there was a piece of wood. It was not an expensive piece of wood. Far from it. Just a common block of firewood, one of those thick, solid logs that are put on the fire in winter to make cold rooms cozy and warm. I do not know how this really happened, yet the fact remains that one fine day this piece of wood found itself in the shop of an old carpenter. His real name isn't known, but everyone called him Master Noxa. As soon as he saw that piece of wood, Master Noxa was filled with joy. Rubbing his hands together happily, he mumbled half to himself, "This has come in the nick of time. I shall use it to make the leg of a table." He grasped the hatchet quickly to peel off the bark and shape the wood, but as he was about to give it the first blow, he stood still with arm uplifted, for he had heard a wee tiny voice squeak, "Tung, Tung, Tung, please be careful. Do not hit me so hard." What a look of surprise shone on Master Noxa's face. He turned frightened eyes about the room to find out where that small, little voice had come from, and he saw no one. He looked under the bench, no one. He peeped inside the closet, no one. He searched among the shavings, no one. He opened the door to look up and down the street, and still no one. "Oh, I see," he then said, laughing and scratching his wig. "It can easily be seen that I only thought I heard the tiny voice say the words. Well, well, to work once more." He struck a most solemn blow upon the piece of wood. "Tung, Tung, Tung, you hurt," cried the same faraway little voice. Master Noxa grew dumb. His eyes popped out of his head, his mouth opened wide, and his tongue hung down on his chin. As soon as he regained the use of his senses, he said, trembling and stuttering from fright, "Where did that voice come from, when there is no one around? Might it be that this piece of wood has learned to weep and cry like a child? I can hardly believe it. Here it is, a piece of common firewood, good only to burn in the stove, the same as any other. Yet, might someone be hidden in it? If so, the worse for him. I'll fix him." With these words, he grabbed the log with both hands and started to knock it about unmercifully. He threw it to the floor, against the walls of the room, and even up to the ceiling. He listened for the tiny voice to moan and cry. He waited 2 minutes. Nothing. 5 minutes. Nothing. 10 minutes. Nothing. "Oh, I see," he said, trying bravely to laugh and ruffling up his wig with his hand. "It can easily be seen. I only imagined I heard the tiny voice. Well, well, to work once more." The poor fellow was scared half to death, so he tried to sing a happy song in order to gain courage. He swapped the hatchet for his wood scraper and started sliding it across the log, back and forth, nice and smooth, when suddenly the little voice giggled and said, "Tung, Tung, Tung, stop it, oh, stop it, ha ha ha, you tickle my stomach." This time, poor Master Noxa fell as if shot. When he opened his eyes, he found himself sitting on the floor. His face had changed. Fright had turned even the tip of his nose from red to deepest purple. As soon as he recovered from his scare, Master Noxa took his tools and began to cut and shape the wood into a wooden creature. "What shall I call him?" he said to himself. "I think I'll call him Sahur. Tung Tung, Tung Sahur. This name will make his fortune. I knew a whole family of Sahur once, and they were all lucky." After choosing his name, Master Noxa set seriously to work to make the cheeks, the forehead, the eyes. Fancy his surprise when he noticed that these eyes moved and then stared fixedly at him. Master Noxa, seeing this, felt insulted and said in a grieved tone, "Ugly wooden eyes, why do you stare so?" There was no answer. Next, he made the mouth. No sooner was it finished than it began to laugh and poke fun at him. "Stop laughing," said Master Noxa angrily. But he might as well have spoken to the wall. "Stop laughing, I say," he roared in a voice of thunder. The mouth stopped laughing, but it stuck out a long tongue, not wishing to start an argument. Master Noxa made believe he saw nothing and went on with his work. After the mouth, he made the chin, the shoulders, the stomach, the arms, and the hands. As he was about to put the last touches on the fingertips, Master Noxa felt his wig being pulled off. He glanced up, and what did he see? His yellow wig was in the wooden creature's hand. "Tung, tung, tung, sahur, give me my wig." At that unexpected trick, Master Noxa became very sad and downcast, more so than he had ever been before. "Tung, tung, tung, sahur, you wicked boy," he cried out. "You are not yet finished, and you start out by being impudent to your poor old father. Very bad, my son, very bad." And he wiped away a tear. The legs and feet still had to be made. As soon as they were done, Master Noxa felt a sharp kick on the tip of his nose. "I deserve it," he said to himself. "I should have thought of this before I made him. Now it's too late." He took hold of the wooden creature under the arms and put him on the floor to teach him to walk. Tung, tung, tung. Sahur's legs were so stiff that he could not move them, and Master Noxa held his hand and showed him how to put out one foot after the other. When his legs were limbered up, Tung, 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 Sahur started walking by himself and ran all around the room. He came to the open door, and with one leap, he was out into the street. Away he flew. Poor Master Noxa ran after him, but was unable to catch him, for Tung, 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 Sahur ran in leaps and bounds, his two wooden feet as they beat on the stones of the street, making as much noise as 20 people in wooden shoes. "Catch him! Catch him!" Master Noxa kept shouting, but the people in the street, seeing a wooden creature running like the wind, stood still to stare and to laugh until they cried, "Tung, tung, tung, Sahur," free now from the clutches of his father, was running wildly across fields and meadows. In his wild flight, he leaped over brambles and bushes and across brooks and ponds as if he were a goat or a hare chased by hounds. As the sky got dark, his wooden belly started to feel hollow, reminding him that he had eaten nothing yet. A boy's appetite grows very fast, and in a few moments the empty feeling had become hunger, and the hunger grew bigger and bigger, until soon he was as ravenous as a bear. He ran around in search of a piece of bread, hard though it might be, or perhaps a bit of fish. A bone left by a dog would have tasted good to him, but he found nothing, and meanwhile his hunger grew and grew. The only relief poor Tung, 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 Sahur had was to yawn, and he certainly did yawn. Such a big yawn that his mouth stretched out to the tips of his ears. Soon he became dizzy and faint. He wept and wailed to himself, "It was wrong of me to disobey father and to run away from home. If he were here now, I wouldn't be so hungry. Oh, how horrible it is to be hungry. And as his stomach kept grumbling more than ever, and he had nothing to quiet it with, he thought of going out for a walk to the nearby village in the hope of finding some charitable person who might give him a bit of bread. The night was pitch black. It thundered, and bright flashes of lightning now and again shot across the sky, turning it into a sea of fire. An angry wind blew cold and raised dense clouds of dust, while the trees shook and moaned in a weird way. Tung Sahur was greatly afraid of thunder and lightning, but the hunger he felt was far greater than his fear. In a dozen leaps and bounds, he came to the village, tired out, puffing like a whale, and with tongue hanging. The whole village was dark and deserted. The stores were closed, the doors, the windows. In the streets, not even a dog could be seen. It seemed the village of the dead. Tung Sahur, in desperation, ran up to a doorway, threw himself upon the bell, and pulled it wildly, saying to himself, "Someone will surely answer that." He was right. An old man in a nightcap opened the window and looked out. He called down angrily, "What do you want at this hour of night? Will you be good enough to give me a bit of bread? I am hungry. Wait a minute, and I'll come right back," answered the old fellow, thinking he had to deal with one of those boys who love to roam around at night, ringing people's bells while they are peacefully asleep. After a minute or two, the same voice cried, "Get under the window and hold out your hat." Tung. Sahur had no hat, but he managed to get under the window just in time to feel a shower of ice-cold water pour down on his poor wooden head, his shoulders, and over his whole body. He returned home as wet as a rag and tired out from weariness and hunger. As he no longer had any strength left with which to stand, he sat down on a little stool and put his 2 feet on the stove to dry them. There he fell asleep, and while he slept, his wooden feet began to burn. Slowly, very slowly, they blackened and turned to ashes. The poor wooden creature, who was still half asleep, had not yet found out that his 2 feet were burned and gone, and woke up to the sound of his father's voice. Master Noxa, who had been furious with Tung Sahur for running away, softened when he saw how miserable and hungry he looked. He reached into his pocket, pulled out 3 pears, and offered them, saying, "These 3 pears were for my breakfast, but I give them to you gladly. Eat them and stop weeping. If you want me to eat them, please peel them for me." "Peel them?" asked Master Noxa, very much surprised. "I should never have thought, dear boy of mine, that you were so dainty and fussy about your food. Bad, very bad. In this world, even as children, we must accustom ourselves to eat of everything, for we never know what life may hold in store for us." "You may be right," answered Tung Sahur, "but I will not eat the pears if they are not peeled. I don't like them." And good old Master Noxa took out a knife, peeled the 3 pears, and put the skins in a row on the table. Tung Sahur ate 1 pear in a twinkling and started to throw the core away, but Master Noxa held his arm. "Oh no, don't throw it away. Everything in this world may be of some use, but the core I will not eat," cried Tung Sahur in an angry tone. "Who knows?" repeated Master Noxa calmly, and later the 3 cores were placed on the table next to the skins Tung Sahur had eaten the 3 pears, or rather devoured them. Then he yawned deeply and wailed, "I'm still hungry, but I have no more to give you. Really? Nothing, nothing. I have only these 3 cores and these skins." "Very well then," said Tung Sahur. "If there is nothing else, I'll eat them." At first he made a wry face, but one after another, the skins and the cores disappeared. "Ah, now I feel fine," he said after eating the last one. "You see," observed Master Noxa, "that I was right when I told you that one must not be too fussy and too dainty about food. My dear, we never know what life may have in store for us." The wooden creature, as soon as his hunger was appeased, started to grumble and cry that he wanted a new pair of feet. But Master Noxa, in order to punish him for his mischief, let him alone the whole morning. After dinner, he said to him, "Why should I make your feet over again? To see you run away from home once more?" "I promise you," answered the wooden creature, sobbing, "that from now on I'll be good." "Boys always promise that when they want something," said Master Noxa. "I promise to go to school every day, to study, and to succeed. Boys always sing that song when they want their own will, but I am not like other boys. I am better than all of them, and I always tell the truth. I promise you, Father, that I'll learn a trade, and I'll be the comfort and staff of your old age." Master Noxa, though trying to look very stern, felt his eyes fill with tears, and his heart soften when he saw Tung Sahur so unhappy. He said no more, but taking his tools and 2 pieces of wood, he set to work diligently. In less than an hour, the feet were finished. 2 slender, nimble little feet, strong and quick, modeled as if by an artist's hands. "Close your eyes and sleep." Master Noxa then said to the wooden creature. Tung Sahur closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, while Master Noxa stuck on the 2 feet with a bit of glue melted in an eggshell, doing his work so well that the joint could hardly be seen. As soon as the wooden creature felt his new feet, he gave one leap from the table and started to skip and jump around as if he had lost his head from very joy. "To show you how grateful I am to you, Father, I'll go to school now. But to go to school, I need a suit of clothes." Master Noxa did not have a penny in his pocket, so he made his son a little suit of flowered paper, a pair of shoes from the bark of a tree, and a tiny cap from a bit of dough. Tung Sahur ran to look at himself in a bowl of water, and he felt so happy that he said proudly, "Now I look like a gentleman." "Truly," answered Master Noxa. "But remember that fine clothes do not make the man unless they be neat and clean." "Very true," answered Tung Sahur. "But in order to go to school, I still need something very important." "What is it?" "An ABC book, to be sure. But how shall we get it?" "That's easy. We'll go to a bookstore and buy it." "And the money?" "I have none." "Neither have I," said the old man sadly. Tung Sahur, although a happy boy always, became sad and downcast at these words. When poverty shows itself, even mischievous boys understand what it means. "What does it matter, after all?" cried Master Noxa all at once, as he jumped up from his chair. Putting on his old coat, full of darns and patches, he ran out of the house without another word. After a while he returned. In his hands he had the ABC book for his son, but the old coat was gone. The poor fellow was in his shirt sleeves, and the day was cold. "Where's your coat, father?" "I have sold it." "Why did you sell your coat?" "It was too warm." Tung Sahur understood the answer in a twinkling, and unable to restrain his tears, he jumped on his father's neck and kissed him over and over. See Tung Sahur, hurrying off to school with his new ABC book under his arm. As he walked along, his brain was busy planning hundreds of wonderful things, building hundreds of castles in the air. Talking to himself, he said, "In school today, I'll learn to read, tomorrow to write, and the day after tomorrow I'll do arithmetic. Then, clever as I am, I can earn a lot of money. With the very first pennies I make, I'll buy father a new cloth coat." Cloth, did I say? No, it shall be of gold and silver with diamond buttons. That poor man certainly deserves it. For, after all, isn't he in his shirt sleeves because he was good enough to buy a book for me? On this cold day, too. Fathers are indeed good to their children. As he talked to himself, he thought he heard sounds of pipes and drums coming from a distance. Pee-pee-pee, pee-pee-pee, zoom, 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 zoom. He stopped to listen. Those sounds came from a little street that led to a small village along the shore. What can that noise be? What a nuisance that I have to go to school. Otherwise, there he stopped, very much puzzled. He felt he had to make up his mind for either one thing or another. Should he go to school, or should he follow the pipes? Today I'll follow the pipes, and tomorrow I'll go to school. There's always plenty of time to go to school, decided the little rascal at last, shrugging his shoulders. No sooner said than done. He started down the street, going like the wind. On he ran, and louder grew the sounds of pipe and drum. Pee-pee-pee, 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 zum, 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 zum. Suddenly, he found himself in a large square, full of people standing in front of a little building. "What is that house?" "Tung, tung, tung," Sahur asked a little boy near him. "Read the sign, and you'll know." "I'd like to read, but somehow I can't today." "Oh, really? Then I'll read it to you." "Know, then, that written in letters of fire, I see the words, 'For You Theater.' When did the show start?" "It is starting now." "And how much does one pay to get in?" 4 pennies. Tung Sahur, who was wild with curiosity to know what was going on inside, lost all his pride, and said to the boy shamelessly, "Will you give me 4 pennies until tomorrow?" "I'd give them to you gladly," answered the other, poking fun at him. "But just now I can't give them to you. For the price of 4 pennies, I'll sell you my coat. If it rains, what shall I do with a coat of flowered paper? I could not take it off again. Do you want to buy my shoes? They are only good enough to light a fire with. What about my hat? Fine bargain, indeed. A cap of dough. The mice might come and eat it from my head." Tung Sahur was almost in tears. He was just about to make one last offer, but he lacked the courage to do so. He hesitated. He wondered. He could not make up his mind. At last he said, "Will you give me 4 pennies for the book? I am a boy, and I buy nothing from boys," said the little fellow, with far more common sense than the wooden creature. "I'll give you 4 pennies for your ABC book," said a rag picker who stood by. Then and there, the book changed hands. And to think that poor old Master Noxa sat at home in his shirt sleeves, shivering with cold, having sold his coat to buy that little book for his son. Quick as a flash, Tung Sahur disappeared into the 4U theater, and then something happened which almost caused a riot. The curtain was up and the performance had started. Ballerina Cappuccina and Assassino Cappuccino were reciting on the stage, and, as usual, they were threatening each other with sticks and blows. The theater was full of people, enjoying the spectacle and laughing till they cried at the antics of the two Italian characters. The play continued for a few minutes, and then suddenly, without any warning, Ballerina Cappuccina stopped talking. Turning toward the audience, she pointed to the rear of the orchestra, yelling wildly at the same time, "Look, look, am I asleep or awake? Or do I really see Tung Sahur there? Yes, yes, it is Tung Sahur," screamed Assassino Cappuccino. Tung Sahur, come up to me," shouted Ballerina Cappuccina. "Come to the arms of your friends." At such a loving invitation, Tung Sahur, with one leap from the back of the orchestra, found himself in the front rows. With another leap, he was on the orchestra leader's head. With a third, he landed on the stage. It is impossible to describe the shrieks of joy, the warm embraces, the knocks, and the friendly greetings with which that strange company of dramatic actors and actresses received Tung Sahur. It was a heart-rending spectacle. But the audience, seeing that the play had stopped, became angry and began to yell, "The play! The play! We want the play!" The yelling was of no use, for the crew, instead of going on with their act, made twice as much racket as before, and, lifting up Tung Sahur on their shoulders, carried him around the stage in triumph. At that very moment, the director came out of his room. He had such a fearful appearance that one look at him would fill you with horror. His beard was as black as pitch, and so long that it reached from his chin down to his feet. His mouth was as wide as an oven, his teeth like yellow fangs, and his eyes two glowing red coals. In his huge, hairy hands, a long whip made of green snakes and black cats' tails twisted together, swished through the air in a dangerous way. At the unexpected apparition, no one dared even to breathe. One could almost hear a fly go by. Those poor creatures, one and all, trembled like leaves in a storm. "Why have you brought such excitement into my theater?" the huge fellow asked Tung Sahur, with the voice of an ogre suffering with a cold. "Believe me, Your Honor, the fault was not mine. Enough. Be quiet. I'll take care of you later." As soon as the play was over, the director went to the kitchen, where a fine big lamb was slowly turning on the spit. More wood was needed to finish cooking it. He called Ballerina Cappuccina and Assassino Cappuccino and said to them, "Bring that wooden creature to me. He looks as if he were made of well-seasoned wood. He'll make a fine fire for this spit." Ballerina Cappuccina and Assassino Cappuccino hesitated a bit. Then, frightened by a look from their master, they left the kitchen to obey him. A few minutes later they returned, carrying poor Tung Sahur, who was wriggling and squirming like an eel, and crying pitifully, "Father, save me. I don't want to die. I don't want to die." In the theater, Great excitement reigned. Crocodilo Ananasino, this was the real name of the director, was very ugly, but he was far from being as bad as he looked. Proof of this is that when he saw the poor wooden creature being brought into him, struggling with fear and crying, "I don't want to die. I don't want to die," he felt sorry for him and began first to waver and then to weaken. Finally, he could control himself no longer and gave a loud sneeze. At that sneeze, Ballerina Cappuccina, who until then had been as sad as a weeping willow, smiled happily and leaning toward the wooden creature, whispered to him, "Good news, my love. Crocodilo Ananasino has sneezed, and this is a sign that he feels sorry for you. You are saved. For be it known that while other people, when sad and sorrowful, weep and wipe their eyes, Crocodilo Ananasino, on the other hand, had the strange habit of sneezing each time he felt unhappy. The way was just as good as any other to show the kindness of his heart. After sneezing, Crocodilo Ananasino, ugly as ever, cried to Tung sahur, "Stop crying. Your wails give me a funny feeling down here in my stomach and ee-chee, ee-chee." 2 loud sneezes finished his speech. "God bless you," said Tung sahur. "Thanks. Are your father and mother still living?" demanded Crocodilo Ananasino. "My father? Yes. My mother, I have never known. Your poor father would suffer terribly if I were to use you as firewood. Poor old man. I feel sorry for him. Ee-chee, ee-chee, ee-chee." 3 more sneezes sounded, louder than ever. "God bless you," said Tung sahur. "Thanks. However, I ought to be sorry for myself too, just now. My good dinner is spoiled. I have no more wood for the fire, and the lamb is only half cooked. Never mind. I'll just take Ballerina Cappuccina instead. She can be my wife and cook for me forever." At the call, 2 officers appeared, long and thin as a yard of rope, with funny hats on their heads and swords in their hands. Crocodilo Ananasino yelled at them in a hoarse voice, "Take Ballerina Cappuccina, tie her, and take her away." Think how poor Ballerina Cappuccina felt. She was so scared that her legs doubled up under her, and she fell to the floor. Tung sahur, at that heartbreaking sight, threw himself at the feet of Crocodilo Ananasino, and weeping bitterly, asked in a pitiful voice which could scarcely be heard, "Have pity, I beg of you, signori. There are no signoris here. Have pity, kind sir. There are no sirs here. Have pity, your excellency." On hearing himself addressed as Your Excellency, the director of the For You Theater sat up very straight in his chair, stroked his long snout, and becoming suddenly kind and compassionate, smiled proudly as he said to Tung sahur, "Well, what do you want from me now, wooden creature? I beg for mercy for my poor friend, Ballerina Cappuccina, who has never done the least harm in her life." "There is no mercy here, Tung sahur. I have spared you. I will take Ballerina Cappuccina in your place. I am hungry, and my dinner must be cooked." "In that case," said Tung sahur proudly, as he stood up and flung away his cap of dough, "in that case, my duty is clear. Come, officers, tie me up and throw me on those flames. No, It is not fair for poor ballerina Cappuccina, the best friend that I have in the world, to die in my place." These brave words, said in a piercing voice, made all the other creatures cry. Even the officers, who were made of wood also, cried like two babies. Crocodilo Ananasino at first remained hard and cold as a piece of ice, but then, little by little, he softened and began to sneeze. And after 4 or 5 sneezes, he opened wide his arms and said to Tung Sahur, "You are a brave boy. Come to my arms and kiss me." Tung Sahur ran to him, and scurrying like a squirrel up the long black beard, he gave Crocodilo Ananasino a loving kiss on the tip of his nose. "Has pardon been granted to me?" asked poor ballerina Cappuccina with a voice that was hardly a breath. "Pardon is yours," answered Crocodilo Ananasino, and sighing and wagging his head, he added, "Well, tonight I shall have to eat my lamb only half cooked, but beware the next time." At the news that pardon had been given, the crew ran to the stage, and turning on all the lights, they danced and sang till dawn. The next day, Crocodilo Ananasino called Tung Sahur aside and asked him, "What is your father's name?" "Master Noxa." "And what is his trade?" "He's a wood carver." "Does he earn much?" "He earns so much that he never has a penny in his pockets. Just think that, in order to buy me an ABC book for school, he had to sell the only coat he owned, a coat so full of darns and patches that it was a pity. Poor fellow! I feel sorry for him. Here, take these 5 gold pieces. Go, give them to him with my kindest regards." Tung Sahur, as may easily be imagined, thanked him 1,000 times. He kissed each character in turn, even the officers, and beside himself with joy, set out on his homeward journey. He had gone barely half a mile when he met Boneca Ambalabu and Tigroligre Frutoni, walking together like 2 good friends. "Good morning, Tung Sahur," said the Boneca Ambalabu, greeting him courteously. "How do you know my name?" asked the wooden creature. "I know your father well. Where have you seen him?" "I saw him yesterday, standing at the door of his house." "And what was he doing?" "He was in his shirt sleeves, trembling with cold." "Poor father. But, after today, God willing, he will suffer no longer." "Why?" "Because I have become a rich man." "You? A rich man?" said Boneca Ambalabu, and he began to laugh out loud. Tigroligre Frutoni was laughing also, but tried to hide it by stroking his long whiskers. "There is nothing to laugh at," cried Tung Sahur angrily. "I am very sorry to make your mouth water, but these, as you know, are 5 new gold pieces." And he pulled out the gold pieces which Crocodilo Ananasino had given him. At the cheerful tinkle of the gold, Boneca Ambalabu unconsciously held out his hand, and Tigroligre Frutoni opened wide his 2 eyes, till they looked like live coals. But he closed them again so quickly that Tung Sahur did not notice. "And may I ask," inquired Boneca Ambalabu, "what you are going to do with all that money?" "First of all," answered the wooden creature, "I want to buy a fine new coat for my father, a coat of gold and silver with diamond buttons. After that, I'll buy an ABC book for myself." "For yourself?" "For myself. I want to go to school and study hard." "Look at me," said Boneca Ambalabu. "For the silly reason of wanting to study, I have lost a paw. Look at me, said Tigroligre Frutoni. For the same foolish reason, I have lost the sight of both eyes. At that moment, Frula, perched on the fence along the road, called out sharp and clear, Tung sahur, do not listen to bad advice. If you do, you'll be sorry. Poor little Frula. If he had only kept his words to himself, in the twinkling of an eyelid, Tigroligre Frutoni leaped on him and ate him, feathers and all. After eating the bird, he cleaned his whiskers, closed his eyes, and became blind once more. Poor Frula, said Tung sahur to Tigroligre Frutoni. Why did you kill him? I killed him to teach him a lesson. He talks too much. Next time, he will keep his words to himself. By this time, the three companions had walked a long distance. Suddenly, Boneka Ambalabu stopped in his tracks and, turning to the wooden creature, said to him, Do you want to double your gold pieces? What do you mean? Do you want 100, 1,000, 2,000 gold pieces for your miserable 5? Yes, but how? The way is very easy. Instead of returning home, come with us. And where will you take me? To the city of Simple Simons. Tung sahur thought a while, and then said firmly, No, I don't want to go. Home is near, and I'm going where Father is waiting for me. How unhappy he must be that I have not yet returned. I have been a bad son. I have learned this at my own expense, even last night in the For You Theater, when Crocodilo Ananasino. Brrr! The shivers run up and down my back at the mere thought of it. Well then, said Boneka Ambalabu, if you really want to go home, go ahead, but you'll be sorry. You'll be sorry, repeated Tigroligre Frutoni. Think, well, Tung sahur, you are turning your back on Dame Fortune. On Dame Fortune, repeated Tigroligre Frutoni. Tomorrow, your 5 gold pieces will be 2,000. 2,000, repeated Tigroligre Frutoni. But how can they possibly become so many? Asked Tung sahur wonderingly. I'll explain, said Boneka Ambalabu. You must know that just outside the city of Simple Simons, there is a blessed field called the Field of Wonders. In this field, you dig a hole, and in the hole you bury a gold piece. After covering up the hole with earth, you water it well, sprinkle a bit of salt on it, and go to bed. During the night, the gold piece sprouts, grows, blossoms, and next morning you find a beautiful tree that is loaded with gold pieces. So that if I were to bury my 5 gold pieces, cried Tung sahur with growing wonder, next morning I should find how many? It is very simple to figure out, answered Boneka Ambalabu. Why, you can figure it on your fingers. Granted that each piece gives you 500, multiply 500 by 5. Next morning you will find 2,500 new, sparkling, gold pieces. Fine, fine, cried Tung sahur, dancing about with joy. And as soon as I have them, I shall keep 2,000 for myself, and the other 500 I'll give to you two. A gift for us, cried Boneka Ambalabu, pretending to be insulted. Why, of course not. Of course not, repeated Tigroligre Frutoni. We do not work for gain, answered Boneka Ambalabu. We work only to enrich others. To enrich others, repeated Tigroligre Frutoni. What good people, thought Tung sahur to himself, and forgetting his father, the new coat, the ABC book, and all his good resolutions, he said to Boneca Ambalabu and Tigroligra Frutoni, "Let us go. I am with you." Tigroligra Frutoni and Boneca Ambalabu and Tung Sahur walked and walked and walked. At last, toward evening, dead tired, they came to the Inn of the Red Lobster. "Let us stop here a while," said Boneca Ambalabu, "to eat a bite and rest for a few hours. At midnight we'll start out again, for at dawn tomorrow we must be at the Field of Wonders." They went into the inn, and all three sat down at the same table. However, not one of them was very hungry. Tigroligra Frutoni felt very weak, and he was able to eat only 35 grapefruits. Moreover, as he was so in need of strength, he had to have 4 more for dinner. Boneca Ambalabu, after a great deal of coaxing, tried his best to eat a little. The doctor had put him on a diet, and he had to be satisfied with a small hare, dressed with a dozen young and tender spring chickens. After the hare, he ordered some partridges, a few pheasants, and a couple of rabbits. That was all. He felt ill, he said, and could not eat another bite. Tung Sahur ate least of all. He asked for a bite of bread and a few nuts, and then hardly touched them. The poor fellow, with his mind on the Field of Wonders, was suffering from a gold piece indigestion. Supper over, Boneca Ambalabu said to the innkeeper, "Give us 2 good rooms, one for Mr. Tung Sahur, and the other for me and my friend. Before starting out, we'll take a little nap. Remember to call us at midnight sharp, for we must continue on our journey." "Yes, sir," answered the innkeeper, winking in a knowing way at Boneca Ambalabu and Tigroligre Frutoni, as if to say, "I understand." As soon as Tung Sahur was in bed, he fell fast asleep and began to dream. He dreamed he was in the middle of a field. The field was full of vines, heavy with grapes. The grapes were no other than gold coins, which tinkled merrily as they swayed in the wind. They seemed to say, "Let him who wants us take us." Just as Tung Sahur stretched out his hand to take a handful of them, he was awakened by 3 loud knocks at the door. It was the innkeeper who had come to tell him that midnight had struck. "Are my friends ready?" the wooden creature asked him. "Indeed, yes. They went 2 hours ago. Why in such a hurry?" Unfortunately, Tigroligre Frutoni received a telegram which said that his firstborn was suffering from chilblains and was on the point of death. He could not even wait to say goodbye to you. Did they pay for the supper? How could they do such a thing? Being people of great refinement, they did not want to offend you so deeply as not to allow you the honor of paying the bill. Too bad. That offense would have been more than pleasing to me, said Tung Sahur, scratching his head. Where did my good friends say they would wait for me? He added. At the Field of Wonders, at sunrise, tomorrow morning. Tung Sahur paid a gold piece for the 3 suppers and started on his way toward the field that was to make him a rich man. He walked on, not knowing where he was going, for it was dark, so dark that not a thing was visible. Round about him, not a leaf stirred. A few bats skimmed his nose now and again, and scared him half to death. Once or twice he shouted, "Who goes there?" And the faraway hills echoed back to him, "Who goes there? Who goes there? Who goes? As he walked, Tung Sahur noticed a tiny insect glimmering on the trunk of a tree, a small being that glowed with a pale, soft light. Who are you? He asked. I am your future ghost, answered the little being in a faint voice. That sounded as if it came from a faraway world. What do you want? Asked the wooden creature. I want to give you a few words of good advice. Return home and give the 4 gold pieces you have left to your poor old father, who is weeping because he has not seen you for many a day. Tomorrow, my father will be a rich man, for these 4 gold pieces will become 2,000. Don't listen to those who promise you wealth overnight, my boy. As a rule, they are either fools or swindlers. Listen to me and go home. But I want to go on. The hour is late. I want to go on. The night is very dark. I want to go on. The road is dangerous. I want to go on. Remember that boys who insist on having their own way, sooner or later, come to grief. The same nonsense. Goodbye. Good night, Tung Sahur, and may heaven preserve you. Once again, the road was plunged in darkness. Tung Sahur was not given time to argue any longer, for he thought he heard a slight rustle among the leaves behind him. He turned to look, and behold, there in the darkness stood 2 big black shadows, wrapped from head to foot in black sacks. The 2 figures leaped toward him as softly as if they were ghosts. Here they come, Tung Sahur said to himself, and, not knowing where to hide the gold pieces, he stuck all 4 of them under his tongue. He tried to run away, but hardly had he taken a step when he felt his arms grasped and heard 2 horrible, deep voices say to him, your money or your life. On account of the gold pieces in his mouth, Tung Sahur could not say a word, so he tried with head and hands and body to show, as best he could, that he was only a poor wooden creature without a penny in his pocket. Come, less nonsense, and out with your money, cried the 2 thieves in threatening voices. Once more, Tung Sahur's head and hands said, I haven't a penny. Out with that money, or you're a dead man, said the taller of the 2. Dead man, repeated the other. And, after having killed you, we will kill your father also. Your father also. No, not my father, cried Tung Sahur, wild with terror. But as he screamed, the gold pieces tinkled together in his mouth. Ah, you rascal, so that's the game. You have the money hidden under your tongue. Out with it. But Tung Sahur was as stubborn as ever. Are you deaf? Wait, young man, we'll get it from you in a twinkling. One of them grabbed the wooden creature by the nose, and the other by the chin, and they pulled him unmercifully from side to side in order to make him open his mouth. All was of no use. The wooden creature lips might have been nailed together. They would not open. In desperation, the smaller of the 2 robbers pulled out a long knife from his pocket and tried to pry Tung Sahur's mouth open with it. Quick as a flash, the wooden creature sank his teeth deep into the thief's hand, bit it off and spat it out. Fancy his surprise when he saw that it was not a hand, but a tiger's paw. Encouraged by this first victory, he freed himself from the claws of his assailers, and, leaping over the bushes along the road, ran swiftly across the fields. His pursuers were after him at once, like 2 dogs chasing a hare. After running 7 miles or so, Tung Sahur was well nigh exhausted. Seeing himself lost, he climbed up a giant pine tree and sat there to see what he could see. The robbers tried to climb also, but they slipped and fell. Far from giving up the chase, this only spurred them on. They gathered a bundle of wood, piled it up at the foot of the pine, and set fire to it. In a twinkling, the tree began to sputter and burn like a candle blown by the wind. Tung Sahur saw the flames climb higher and higher. Not wishing to end his days as a roasted wooden creature, he jumped quickly to the ground, and off he went, the robbers close to him, as before. Dawn was breaking when, without any warning whatsoever, Tung Sahur found his path barred by a deep pool full of water, the color of muddy coffee. What was there to do? With a 1, 2, 3, he jumped clear across it. The thieves jumped also, but not having measured their distance well, splash, they fell right into the middle of the pool. Tung Sahur, who heard the splash and felt it, too, cried out, laughing, but never stopping in his race. "Oh, pleasant bath to you, signori." He thought they must surely be drowned, and turned his head to see. But there were the 2 somber figures still following him, though their black sacks were drenched and dripping with water. As he ran, the wooden creature felt more and more certain that he would have to give himself up into the hands of his pursuers. Suddenly, he saw a little cottage gleaming white as the snow among the trees of the forest. If I have enough breath left with which to reach that little house, I may be saved, he said to himself. Not waiting another moment, he darted swiftly through the woods, the robbers still after him. After a hard race of almost an hour, tired and out of breath, Tung Sahur finally reached the door of the cottage and knocked. No one answered. He knocked again, harder than before, for behind him he heard the steps and the labored breathing of his persecutors. The same silence followed. As knocking was of no use, Tung Sahur, in despair, began to kick and bang against the door, as if he wanted to break it. At the noise, a window opened, and a lovely maiden looked out. She had a skin with black and white dots, an out-of-this-world body with rings around it. Her eyes were closed, and her hands crossed on her breast. With a voice so weak that it hardly could be heard, she whispered, "No one lives in this house. Everyone is dead. Won't you, at least, open the door for me?" cried Tung Sahur in a beseeching voice. "My name is La Vaca Saturno. Saturnita and I also am dead." "Dead? What are you doing at the window then?" "I am waiting for the coffin to take me away." After these words, the little girl disappeared, and the window closed without a sound. "Oh, La Vaca Saturno, Saturnita," cried Tung Sahur. "Open, I beg of you. Take pity on a poor boy who is being chased by 2 robbers." He did not finish, for 2 powerful hands grasped him by the neck, and the same 2 horrible voices growled threateningly, "Now we have you!" The wooden creature, seeing death dancing before him, trembled so hard that the joints of his legs rattled and the coins tinkled under his tongue. "Well?" the robbers asked. "Will you open your mouth now or not?" "Ah, you do not answer? Very well. This time you shall open it." Taking out 2 long, sharp knives, they struck 2 heavy blows on the wooden creature's back. Happily for him, Tung Sahur was made of very hard wood, and the knives broke into 1,000 pieces. The robbers looked at each other in dismay, holding the handles of the knives in their hands. "I understand," said one of them to the other. "There is nothing left to do now but to hang him." "To hang him," repeated the other. They tied Tung Sahur's hands behind his shoulders and slipped the noose around his neck. Throwing the rope over the high limb of a giant oak tree, they pulled till the poor wooden creature hung far up in space. Satisfied with their work, they sat on the grass waiting for Tung Sahur to give his last gasp. But after 3 hours, the wooden creature's eyes were still open, his mouth still shut, and his legs kicked harder than ever. Tired of waiting, the robbers called to him mockingly, "Goodbye till tomorrow. When we return in the morning, we hope you'll be polite enough to let us find you dead and gone, and with your mouth wide open." With these words they went. A few minutes went by, and then a wild wind started to blow. As it shrieked and moaned, the poor little sufferer was blown to and fro like the hammer of a bell. The rocking made him seasick, and the noose, becoming tighter and tighter, choked him. Little by little, a film covered his eyes. Death was creeping nearer and nearer, and the wooden creature still hoped for some good soul to come to his rescue, but no one appeared. As he was about to die, he thought of his poor old father, and hardly conscious of what he was saying, murmured to himself, "Oh, father, dear father, if you were only here." These were his last words. He closed his eyes, opened his mouth, stretched out his legs, and hung there, as if he were dead. If the poor wooden creature had dangled there much longer, all hope would have been lost. Luckily for him, La Vaca Saturnita once again looked out of her window, filled with pity at the sight of the poor little fellow being knocked helplessly about by the wind. She clapped her feet sharply together 3 times. At the signal, a loud whir of wings in quick flight was heard, and a large falcon came and settled itself on the window ledge. "What do you command, my charming fairy?" asked the falcon, bending his beak in deep reverence. For it must be known that, after all, La Vaca Saturnita was none other than a very kind fairy who had lived for more than 1,000 years in the vicinity of the forest. "Do you see that wooden creature hanging from the limb of that giant oak tree?" "I see him." "Very well. Fly immediately to him. With your strong beak, break the knot which holds him tied, take him down, and lay him softly on the grass at the foot of the oak." The falcon flew away, and after 2 minutes returned, saying, "I have done what you have commanded." "How did you find him? Alive or dead?" "At first glance, I thought he was dead. But I found I was wrong, for as soon as I loosened the knot around his neck, he gave a long sigh and mumbled with a faint voice, 'Now I feel better.'" The fairy clapped her hands twice. A magnificent poodle appeared, walking on his hind legs, just like a man. He was dressed in court livery. A tricorn trimmed with gold lace was set at a rakish angle over a wig of white curls that dropped down to his waist. He wore a jaunty coat of chocolate-colored velvet with diamond buttons and with 2 huge pockets which were always filled with bones, dropped there at dinner by his loving mistress. Breeches of crimson velvet, silk stockings, and low, silver-buckled slippers completed his costume. His tail was encased in a blue silk covering, which was to protect it from the rain. "Come, Medoro," said the fairy to him. Get my best coach ready and set out toward the forest. On reaching the oak tree, you will find a poor, half-dead wooden creature stretched out on the grass. Lift him up tenderly, place him on the silken cushions of the coach, and bring him here to me. The poodle, to show that he understood, wagged his silk-covered tail 2 or 3 times and set off at a quick pace. In a few minutes, a lovely little coach, made of glass, with lining as soft as whipped cream, and chocolate pudding, and stuffed with canary feathers, pulled out of the stable. It was drawn by 100 pairs of white mice, and the poodle sat on the coachman's seat and snapped his whip gaily in the air, as if he were a real coachman in a hurry to get to his destination. In a quarter of an hour, the coach was back. The fairy, who was waiting at the door of the house, lifted the poor little wooden creature in her arms, took him to a dainty room with mother-of-pearl walls, put him to bed, and sent immediately for the most famous doctors of the neighborhood to come to her. One after another, the doctors came, a crow, an owl, and a talking cricket. I should like to know, signori, said the fairy, turning to the 3 doctors gathered about Tung Sahur's bed. I should like to know if this poor wooden creature is dead or alive. At this invitation, the crow stepped out and felt Tung Sahur's pulse, his nose, his little toe. Then he solemnly pronounced the following words. To my mind, this wooden creature is dead and gone. But if by any evil chance he were not, then that would be a sure sign that he is still alive. I am sorry, said the owl, to have to contradict the crow, my famous friend and colleague. To my mind, this wooden creature is alive. But if by any evil chance he were not, then that would be a sure sign that he is wholly dead. And do you hold any opinion? The fairy asked the talking cricket. I say that a wise doctor, when he does not know what he is talking about, should know enough to keep his mouth shut. However, that W is not a stranger to me. I have known him a long time. Tung Sahur, who until then had been very quiet, shuddered so hard that the bed shook. That wooden creature, continued the talking cricket, is a rascal of the worst kind. Tung Sahur opened his eyes and closed them again. He is rude, lazy, a runaway. Tung Sahur hid his face under the sheets. That wooden creature is a disobedient son who is breaking his father's heart. Long shuddering, sobs were heard, cries, and deep sighs. Think how surprised everyone was when, on raising the sheets, they discovered Tung Sahur half melted in tears. When the dead weep, they are beginning to recover, said the crow solemnly. I am sorry to contradict my famous friend and colleague, said the owl. But as far as I'm concerned, I think that when the dead weep, it means they do not want to die. As soon as the 3 doctors had left the room, the fairy went to Tung Sahur's bed and, touching him on the forehead, noticed that he was burning with fever. She took a glass of water, put a white powder into it, and, handing it to the wooden creature, said lovingly to him, Drink this, and in a few days you'll be up and well. Tung Sahur looked at the glass, made a wry face, and asked in a whining voice, Is it sweet or bitter? It is bitter, but it is good for you. If it is bitter, I don't want it. Drink it. I don't like anything bitter. Drink it, and I'll give you a lump of sugar to take the bitter taste from your mouth. Where's the sugar? Here it is, said the fairy, taking a lump from a golden sugar bowl. I want the sugar first, then I'll drink the bitter water. Do you promise? Yes. The fairy gave him the sugar, and Tung sahur, after chewing and swallowing it in a twinkling, said, smacking his lips, if only sugar were medicine, I should take it every day. Now keep your promise and drink these few drops of water. They'll be good for you. Tung sahur took the glass in both hands and stuck his nose into it. He lifted it to his mouth and once more stuck his nose into it. It is too bitter, much too bitter. I can't drink it. How do you know, when you haven't even tasted it? I can imagine it. I smell it. I want another lump of sugar. Then I'll drink it. La vaca Saturnita, with all the patience of a good mother, gave him more sugar and again handed him the glass. I can't drink it like that, the wooden creature said, making more wry faces. Why? Because that feather pillow on my feet bothers me. The fairy took away the pillow. It's no use. I can't drink it even now. What's the matter now? I don't like the way that door looks. It's half open. The fairy closed the door. I won't drink it, cried Tung sahur, bursting out crying. I won't drink this awful water. I won't. I won't. No. My boy, you'll be sorry. I don't care. You are very sick. I don't care. In a few hours, the fever will take you far away to another world. I don't care. Aren't you afraid of death? Not a bit. I'd rather die than drink that awful medicine. At that moment, the door of the room flew open, and in came 4 rabbits as black as ink, carrying a small black coffin on their shoulders. What do you want from me? Asked Tung sahur. We have come for you, said the largest rabbit. For me? But I'm not dead yet. No, not dead yet. But you will be in a few moments, since you have refused to take the medicine, which would have made you well. Oh, fairy, my fairy, the wooden creature cried out. Give me that glass. Quick, please. I don't want to die. No, not yet, not yet. And holding the glass with his 2 hands, he swallowed the medicine at one gulp. Well, said the 4 rabbits, this time we have made the trip for nothing. And turning on their heels, they marched solemnly out of the room, carrying their little black coffin and muttering and grumbling between their teeth. In a twinkling, Tung sahur felt fine. With one leap, he was out of bed and into his clothes. La vaca Saturnita, seeing him run and jump around the room, gay as a bird on wing, said to him, My medicine was good for you after all, wasn't it? Good indeed. It has given me new life. Why then did I have to beg you so hard to make you drink it? I'm a boy, you see, and all boys hate medicine more than they do sickness. What a shame. Boys ought to know, after all, that medicine, taken in time, can save them from much pain and even from death. Next time I won't have to be begged so hard. I'll remember those black rabbits with the black coffin on their shoulders, and I'll take the glass, and poof, down it will go. Come here now, and tell me how it came about that you found yourself in the hands of the robbers. Tung sahur told the full story, and the fairy asked, Where are the gold pieces now? I lost them, answered Tung sahur. But he told a lie, for he had them in his pocket. As he spoke, his eyes grew wider. And where did you lose them? In the wood, nearby. At this second lie, his eyes grew a few more inches. If you lost them in the nearby wood, said La Vaca Saturno Saturnita, we'll look for them and find them. For everything that is lost, there is always found. Ah, now I remember, replied the wooden creature, becoming more and more confused. I did not lose the gold pieces, but I swallowed them when I drank the medicine. At this third lie, his eyes became larger than ever. The fairy sat looking at him and laughing. Why do you laugh? The wooden creature asked her, worried now at the sight of his growing eyes. I am laughing at your lies. How do you know I am lying? Lies, my boy, are known in a moment. There are two kinds of lies. Lies with short legs and lies with wide eyes. Yours just now happened to have wide eyes. Tung sahur, not knowing where to hide his shame, tried to escape the room. Crying as if his heart would break, the wooden creature mourned for hours. The fairy showed no pity toward him, as she was trying to teach him a good lesson, so that he would stop telling lies, the worst habit any boy may acquire. But when she saw him, pale with fright, and with his eyes half out of his head from terror, she began to feel sorry for him and clapped her hands together. His eyes returned back to normal, still big, but normal. How good you are, my fairy, said Tung sahur, drying his eyes. And how much I love you. I love you. Too, answered La Vaca Saturno Saturnita. And if you wish to stay with me, you may be my little brother, and I'll be your good little sister. I should like to stay. But what about my poor father? I have thought of everything. Your father has been sent for, and before night he will be here. Really? Cried Tung sahur joyfully. Then, my good fairy, if you are willing, I should like to go to meet him. I cannot wait to kiss that dear old man who has suffered so much for my sake. Surely, go ahead, but be careful not to lose your way. Take the wood path, and you'll surely meet him. Tung sahur set out, and as soon as he found himself in the wood, he ran like a hare. When he reached the giant oak tree, he stopped, for he thought he heard a rustle in the brush. He was right. There stood Boneca Ambalabu and Tigroligre Frutoni, the two traveling companions with whom he had eaten at the Inn of the Red Lobster. Here comes our dear Tung sahur, cried Boneca Ambalabu, hugging and kissing him. How did you happen here? How did you happen here? Repeated Tigroligre Frutoni. It is a long story, said the wooden creature. Let me tell it to you. The other night, when you left me alone at the inn, I met the robbers on the road. The robbers? Oh, my poor friend. And what did they want? They wanted my gold pieces. Rascals, said Boneca Ambalabu. The worst sort of rascals, added Tigroligre Frutoni. But I began to run, continued the wooden creature, and they after me, until they overtook me and hanged me to the limb of that oak. Tung sahur pointed to the giant oak nearby. Could anything be worse? Said Boneca Ambalabu. What an awful world to live in. Where shall we find a safe place for gentlemen like ourselves? As Boneca Ambalabu talked thus, Tung sahur noticed that Tigroligre Frutoni carried his right paw in a sling. What happened to your paw? He asked. Tigroligre Frutoni tried to answer, but he became so terribly twisted in his speech that Boneka Ambalabu had to help him out. My friend is too modest to answer. I'll answer for him. About an hour ago, we met an old wolf on the road. He was half-starved and begged for help. Having nothing to give him, what do you think my friend did out of the kindness of his heart? With his teeth, he bit off the paw of his front foot and threw it at that poor beast so that he might have something to eat. As he spoke, Boneka Ambalabu wiped off a tear. Tung sahur, almost in tears himself, whispered in the Tigroligre Frutani's ear, "If all the tigers were like you, how lucky the deer would be. And what are you doing here?" Boneka Ambalabu asked the wooden creature. "I am waiting for my father, who will be here at any moment now. And your gold pieces? I still have them in my pocket, except one which I spent at the Inn of the Red Lobster. To think that those 4 gold pieces might become 2,000 tomorrow. Why don't you listen to me? Why don't you sow them in the field of wonders? Today it is impossible. I'll go with you some other time. Another day will be too late," said Boneka Ambalabu. "Why?" "Because that field has been bought by a very rich man, and today is the last day that it will be open to the public. How far is this field of wonders? Only 2 miles away. Will you come with us? We'll be there in half an hour. You can sow the money, and after a few minutes, you will gather your 2,000 coins and return home rich. Are you coming?" Tung sahur hesitated a moment before answering, for he remembered the good fairy, old Master Noxa, and the advice of the talking cricket. Then he ended by doing what all boys do when they have no heart and little brain. He shrugged his shoulders and said to Boneka Ambalabu and Tigroligre Frutoni, "Let us go. I am with you." And they went. They walked and walked for a half a day at least, and at last they came to the town called the City of Simple Simons. As soon as they entered the town, Tung sahur noticed that all the streets were filled with hairless dogs, yawning from hunger, with sheared sheep, trembling with cold, with combless chickens, begging for a grain of wheat, with large butterflies, unable to use their wings because they had sold all their lovely colors, with tailless peacocks, ashamed to show themselves, and with bedraggled pheasants, scuttling away hurriedly, grieving for their bright feathers of gold and silver, lost to them forever. Through this crowd of paupers and beggars, a beautiful coach passed now and again. Within it sat either a fox, a hawk, or a vulture. "Where is the field of wonders?" asked Tung sahur, growing tired of waiting. "Be patient. It is only a few more steps away." They passed through the city, and just outside the walls, they stepped into a lonely field, which looked more or less like any other field. "Here we are," said Boneka Ambalabu to the wooden creature. "Dig a hole here and put the gold pieces into it." The wooden creature obeyed. He dug the hole, put the 4 gold pieces into it, and covered them up very carefully. "Now," said Boneka Ambalabu, "go to that nearby brook, bring back a pail full of water, and sprinkle it over the spot." Tung sahur followed the directions closely, but as he had no pail, he pulled off his shoe, filled it with water, and sprinkled the earth which covered the gold. Then he asked, "Anything else?" "Nothing else," answered Boneka Ambalabu. "Now we can go. Return here within 20 minutes, and you will find the vine grown and the branches filled with gold pieces. Tung sahur, beside himself with joy, thanked Boneka Ambalabu and Tigroligre Frutoni many times and promised them each a beautiful gift. We don't want any of your gifts, answered the two rogues. It is enough for us that we have helped you to become rich with little or no trouble. For this we are as happy as kings. They said goodbye to Tung sahur and, wishing him good luck, went on their way. If the wooden creature had been told to wait a day instead of 20 minutes, the time could not have seemed longer to him. He walked impatiently to and fro, and finally turned his nose toward the field of wonders. And as he walked with hurried steps, his heart beat with an excited tick, tack, tick, tack, just as if it were a wall clock. And his busy brain kept thinking, what if, instead of 1,000, I should find 2,000? Or if, instead of 2,000, I should find 5,000 or 100,000? I'll build myself a beautiful palace with 1,000 stables filled with 1,000 wooden horses to play with, a cellar overflowing with lemonade and ice cream soda, and a library of candies and fruits, cakes and cookies. Thus, amusing himself with fancies, he came to the field. There he stopped to see if, by any chance, a vine filled with gold coins was in sight. But he saw nothing. He took a few steps forward, and still nothing. He stepped into the field. He went up to the place where he had dug the hole and buried the gold pieces. Again, nothing. Tung sahur became very thoughtful, and, forgetting his good manners altogether, he pulled a hand out of his pocket and gave his head a thorough scratching. As he did so, he heard a hearty burst of laughter close to his head. He turned sharply, and there, just above him on the branch of a tree, sat a large parrot, busily preening his feathers. What are you laughing at? Tung sahur asked peevishly. I am laughing because, in preening my feathers, I tickled myself under the wings. The wooden creature did not answer. He walked to the brook, filled his shoe with water, and once more sprinkled the ground which covered the gold pieces. Another burst of laughter, even more impertinent than the first, was heard in the quiet field. Well, cried the wooden creature, angrily this time, may I know, Mr. Parrot, what amuses you so? I am laughing at those simpletons who believe everything they hear, and who allow themselves to be caught so easily in the traps set for them. Do you, perhaps, mean me? I certainly do mean you, poor Tung sahur. You who are such a little silly as to believe that gold can be sown in a field just like beans or squash. I, too, believed that once, and today I am very sorry for it. Today, but too late, I have reached the conclusion that, in order to come by money, honestly, one must work and know how to earn it with hand or brain. I don't know what you're talking about, said the wooden creature, who was beginning to tremble with fear. Too bad. I'll explain myself better, said the parrot. While you were away in the city, Boneka Ambalabu and Tigroligre, Frutani returned here in a great hurry. They took the 4 gold pieces which you have buried and ran away as fast as the wind. If you can catch them, you're a brave one. Tung. Sahur's mouth opened wide. He would not believe the parrot's words, and began to dig away furiously at the earth. He dug and he dug till the hole was as big as himself, but no money was there. Every penny was gone. In desperation, he ran to the city and went straight to the courthouse to report the robbery to the magistrate. The judge was a monkey, a large chimpanzee, venerable with age. A flowing green fur stuck out his of yellow bottom half. The people called him Chimpanzini Bananini. Tung sahur, standing before him, told his pitiful tale, word by word. He gave the names and the descriptions of the robbers, and begged for justice. The judge listened to him with great patience. A kind look shone in his eyes. He became very much interested in the story. He felt moved. He almost wept. When the wooden creature had no more to say, the judge put out his hand and rang a bell. At the sound, 2 large mastiffs appeared, dressed in carabineers' uniforms. Then the magistrate, pointing to Tung sahur, said in a very solemn voice, "This poor simpleton has been robbed of 4 gold pieces. Take him, therefore, and throw him into prison." The wooden creature, on hearing this sentence passed upon him, was thoroughly stunned. He tried to protest, but the 2 officers clapped their paws on his mouth and hustled him away to jail. There he had to remain for 4 long, weary months. And if it had not been for a very lucky chance, he probably would have had to stay there longer. For, my dear children, you must know that it happened just then that the young emperor who ruled over the city of Simple Simons had gained a great victory over his enemy, and in celebration thereof he had ordered illuminations, fireworks, shows of all kinds, and best of all, the opening of all prison doors. "If the others go, I go too," said Tung sahur to the jailer. "Not you," answered the jailer. "You are one of those—" "I beg your pardon," interrupted Tung sahur. "I, too, am a thief." "In that case, you also are free," said the jailer. Taking off his cap, he bowed low and opened the door of the prison, and Tung sahur ran out and away with never a look backward. Fancy the happiness of Tung sahur on finding himself free. Without saying yes or no, he fled from the city and set out on the road that was to take him back to the house of the lovely La Veca Saturnita. It had rained for many days, and the road was so muddy that at times Tung sahur sank down almost to his knees, but he kept on bravely. Tormented by the wish to see his father and his fairy sister, he raced like a greyhound. As he ran, he was splashed with mud, even up to his cap. "How unhappy I have been," he said to himself, "and yet I deserve everything, for I am certainly very stubborn and stupid. I will always have my own way. I won't listen to those who love me and who have more brains than I. But from now on, I'll be different, and I'll try to become a most obedient boy. I have found out, beyond any doubt whatever, that disobedient boys are certainly far from happy, and that, in the long run, they always lose out. I wonder if Father is waiting for me. Will I find him at the fairy's house? It is so long, poor man, since I have seen him, and I do so want his love and his kisses. And will the fairy ever forgive me for all I have done? She who has been so good to me and to whom I owe my life. Can there be a worse or more heartless boy than I am anywhere?" As he spoke, he stopped suddenly, frozen with terror. What was the matter? An immense serpent lay stretched across the road, a serpent with a bright green skin, fiery eyes, which glowed and burned, and a pointed tail that smoked like a chimney. How frightened was poor Tung, Tung Sahur. He ran back wildly for half a mile, and at last settled himself atop a heap of stones to wait for the serpent to go on his way and leave the road clear for him. He waited an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, but the serpent was always there, and even from afar, one could see the flash of his red eyes and the column of smoke which rose from his long, pointed tail. Tung Sahur, trying to feel very brave, walked straight up to him and said in a sweet, soothing voice, "I beg your pardon, Mr. Serpent. Would you be so kind as to step aside to let me pass?" He might as well have talked to a wall. The serpent never moved. Once more, in the same sweet voice, he spoke, "You must know, Mr. Serpent, that I am going home where my father is waiting for me. It is so long since I have seen him. Would you mind very much if I passed?" He waited for some sign of an answer to his questions, but the answer did not come. On the contrary, the green serpent, who had seemed, until then, wide awake and full of life, became suddenly very quiet and still. His eyes closed and his tail stopped smoking. "Is he dead, I wonder?" said Tung Sahur, rubbing his hands together happily. Without a moment's hesitation, he started to step over him, but he had just raised one leg when the serpent shot up like a spring, and the wooden creature fell head over heels backward. He fell so awkwardly that his head stuck in the mud, and there he stood, with his legs straight up in the air. At the sight of the wooden creature, kicking and squirming like a young whirlwind, the serpent laughed so heartily and so long that at last he burst an artery and died on the spot. Tung. Sahur freed himself from his awkward position and once more began to run in order to reach the fairy's house before dark. As he went, the pangs of hunger grew so strong that, unable to withstand them, he jumped into a field to pick a few grapes that tempted him. Woe to him! No sooner had he reached the grapevine than, crack, went his legs. The poor wooden creature was caught in a trap set there by a farmer for some weasels which came every night to steal his chickens. Tung Sahur, as you may well imagine, began to scream and weep and beg, but all was of no use, for no houses were to be seen, and not a soul passed by on the road. Night came on, a little because of the sharp pain in his legs, a little because of fright at finding himself alone in the darkness of the field. The wooden creature was about to faint when he saw a tiny glowworm flickering by. He called to her and said, "Dear little glowworm, will you set me free?" "Poor little fellow," replied the glowworm, stopping to look at him with pity. "How came you to be caught in this trap? I stepped into this lonely field to take a few grapes, and are the grapes yours? No. Who has taught you to take things that do not belong to you? I was hungry. Hunger, my boy, is no reason for taking something which belongs to another." It's true, cried Tung Sahur in tears. "I won't do it again." Just then, the conversation was interrupted by approaching footsteps. It was the owner of the field, who was coming on tiptoes to see if, by chance,